I reckon that most of us are familiar with the principle of Lester's method, that it's about letting go of desire, letting go of wanting. And this principle is communicated through basically every other great spiritual master, like Jesus, for example, when it says in the Bible, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And most of us, we understand this concept. We get it. And some of us, we even repeat to ourselves over and over and over again, I must want imperturbability more than I want anything else in the world. And we say this like every time we release. The problem is that the ego, as simple as this method is, it could hijack it, latch onto it, and get us into thinking that we're releasing, thinking that we're letting go, when we're really not. And oftentimes, when we make these claims, I want imperturbability more than anything else, and we do a little tiny release, the next second, literally immediately afterwards, we turn right around and we do the opposite. We start indulging our desires. Oh, I gotta have this, I gotta have my coffee, I gotta have my sweets, I gotta have this thing that gives me comfort, or this thing that satisfies this dopamine hit, or I gotta pay attention to this worry, this fear. And we're going right back into our mind, our ego, our desires, completely forgetting what it was that we declared that we wanted just the moment before. And that's why I want to share with you a very enlightening clip from a recent class that we did in the Oneness in Relationships course, which is all about getting our ego out of the way so that all of our relationships can flow with harmony and love and just be incredible. And so in this course, we took a thorough examination of what it means to get our ego out of the way, to get ourselves in a place where we are really desireless. And we know what that means. Not just say it, but we understand it, we feel it viscerally, the goodness of what it means to be desireless, and know it in such a way that we really do want it. Not just say it, but really want it more than anything else. All right, so I want to share this clip with you, and so you can start to discriminate and see for yourself and see the value of what it means to drop desire and the life that you can expect when you do it. All right, so check this out, follow along, see if you get any insights. If you get any insights or if you have any questions, drop those in the comments below. But check this out. This is a very important lesson on freedom.
Hi, Kris. I noticed a lot of resistance to giving up or letting go of pleasures from the world.
Uh-huh.
I recognize consciously that taking all my joy from within is a really good thing, but there is a lot of resistance to that.
Uh-huh.
It's mostly resistance to letting go of the world.
Right. Now, you remember what Lester said. For every ounce of pleasure you take from the world, you get pounds of pain,
Yep.
right? Now, to most of us, that's something that's difficult to comprehend because those pleasures seem very real, right? Those dopamine hits are very enticing. And it's like, well, I hear you, Lester, but I really like those pleasures. They do give me something. But we could start to recognize how much negativity comes along with it. For example, like with foods, right? You mentioned before there's a lot of sweet things that you like to eat, right?
Right.
But look at how much, oh, well, first of all, look at the consequences for eating a lot of the sweet things, right? It
Weight gain.
contributes to the weight gain, which is something that you want to lose. Yeah,
Right.
right. So that in itself just creates this whole downward effect of frustration and effort to have to deal with that, right? So a little
Yes.
bit of pleasure creates a lot of work for you on the back end. So that's one thing
That's
to look
true.
at. And also, feeling wise, psychologically, you see there's a lot of beating yourself up and judging yourself that goes along with that,
Absolutely. Yes.
right? So then you start to kind of measure those things and weigh them. And it's what is it really worth? And then you can start to discriminate. Well, those sweet things that I like to eat, how long does it really last, that pleasure? It's literally like
No, it
two
doesn't.
seconds and then the taste is gone. Once you take a sip of water, it's already gone. It, it's like, okay, and then I got to deal with the consequences of this for the next 2 months. I'm trying to lose this weight and all that stuff. Just for two
Y-
seconds of pleasure. You start to realize,
Yes.
is it really worth it? Now,
No.
that's just on kind of a very practical aspect of what we're looking at. But also, you know that you've experienced how when you get nice and quiet, there's nothing better than that, being in beingness,
That
right?
that is true.
In fact, Larry used to point out how we have this expression like there's nothing better than a juicy steak. There's nothing better than a hot lava cake, right? Now, we don't realize what we're saying, but we're literally saying nothing is better. You get that?
Yes. Yes.
Nothing is better than that. And from
Oh,
the
I just got it.
perspective, when you get nice and high, you look at how your ego pulls at you. Gotta have this, and how heavy that is, right?
Yep. Yep.
So then that starts to get you to see more. Well, where is my happiness? It's really there when I get nice and quiet. And all of that wanting and gotta have and holding on to the world, as you said, pulls me down into troubles, into misery. Now I'm starting to sound like Lester. This is everything that Lester talked about over and 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 over again. And he said he'll keep on saying it until we listen. But it's simple. But look, when he said that for every ounce of pleasure, you get pounds of pounds and pounded with pain, the first time I recognized the depth of that was when I had that major experience of freedom. Like I was talking about the other week with Priscilla, when I was
Right.
at that retreat and I was going for it. And then at the last day, I really popped into it. And after I had that experience, I was there for weeks, weeks and weeks with no thinking. I went back to LA, was not thinking, didn't need to think. And it was brilliant. But then, you know, I read that thing from Lester about scorching the mind. We got to keep scorching it because sometimes we feel like we got it and then we've lost it again. Because, we can get up into freedom, but if we haven't eliminated the ego, whatever's left will reemerge. And so for me, after being in the most incredible state of no thinking, I mean, I'm talking about no thinking, not even a thought of, gee, this is nice. Just nothing. Didn't need to
Mm.
think at all. Not one word in my head. And it was an amazing experience. But I still had some ego left there. And it came up a few weeks later. And you know that video of Lester where he talks about Yogananda
Yes.
going up to the mountain to see, I think, his master Yukteswar? And along the way, he collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain, crying out for an experience of God. Remember that?
I don't know if I've heard that one. No.
Um, I'll drop it into week 4. I'll look for it. Might take a couple days to make sure I got it because I'm going to be on the road again later today. But yeah, I'll put that in there. He talks about how Yogananda literally just fell to the ground just all of a sudden, writhing in pain, like in agony, crying out again for an experience of God. And that's what I experienced when that ego came back.
Mm.
When I came back into thinking again. See, most of us don't realize. And there's another story about these Indian fisherwomen. They lived up in the hills. And, what they would do is the men would go down the hill, down to the river and fish all day long. And the women would go down, they collect the fish, and they would carry them back up, up the hillside to the village. And they would carry them in these baskets on their heads. And so one day they were carrying these baskets of stinking fish on their heads back up to the village. And they passed along the way this beautiful meadow full of fragrant flowers. And they decided, hey, let's take a break and take a nap in the flowers. It smells so good here. So they set their baskets of smelly fish down by the roadside, walked out into the middle of the field, laid down, but they found that they could not sleep. They weren't able to fall asleep until they figured out that they went back to the roadside, grabbed those baskets of smelly fish, pulled them back next to them, laid down next to the smelly fish, then they could sleep. Now, the point of that is we've become so accustomed to this state of being oppressed that we think that it's normal and it's natural to us. And a good example of that is before you learned how to release, you probably first experienced your very first release by noticing the contraction and opening up the door,
Right.
letting the energy go. And all of a sudden you notice a difference, right? There's 4 ways to handle a feeling, right? I
Right.
can suppress it. I can try to escape it. I can express it, which most of the world, and before we learn how to release, we're doing one of those 3 things, or all of them, with our feelings. But then we realize, oh, I can just open up and let it go. And it's a big difference. You're like, wow, I didn't even know it was like that. So that's why it's difficult for us to really comprehend what Lester says when he says, for every ounce of pleasure, we get pounds and pounds and pounded with pain. So when I came back down from that state of no thinking, it felt like I was literally being crushed, coming back into the heaviness of thought, into the heaviness of desire. And it was agonizing. I was literally scraping myself across the floor, clawing myself to move across the floor. I was that crushed by the experience of coming back into the mind again. Then I realized, wow, that's what Lester's talking about. And so all of us, we can relate to that just from that high state. We get nice and high. Like when we do that Venus cleanup, that's the 4th video that I dropped into week 3. And I do that sort of cleanup in each and every class. And so all of us have experienced that. But go back and just compare that. And that'll help you to discriminate. Look, I'm going to follow the way of Lester. And another thing you discriminate about is, all these things that you're chasing after in the world, it's never enough, is it?
No,
You can
no,
never
it's
have
not.
enough chocolate cake, juicy steaks. You can never have enough sex. All those things that we look for in the world. And we have to come back again and again, go through all of our troubles, all of our miseries, just for those little slices of pleasure until we finally discriminate and say, enough is enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So ultimately, it's a decision. I can't make that decision for you. Lester can't.
Right.
Yeah, it's only up to you. And that's why, I think it was on Thursday, but I probably pointed it out several times in this course already. Step 2 of the method is so key. I decide to use the method and be imperturbable. Now, there's some releasers, they say, okay, get step 1 in place. All right. Oh, okay. I want imperturbability more than I want approval, control, and security. All right. Get step 2 in place. So I decide to use the method and be imperturbable. But just saying it doesn't mean that you're really in line with it. And a lot of
True.
times, the more we just say it, it becomes rote, right? We're just saying the words because we're supposed to. It's part of the protocol. But what I was talking about on Thursday was that it's the totality of this work, bringing in all these things that we learn again and again in the courses about taking responsibility, about seeing where we are on the emotional chart, understanding the 3 aspects of the mind, the sensing aspect, the recording and playback aspect versus the discriminating aspect, and looking, see where we are. Am I on automatic or am I discriminating? Where am I on the chart? Am I in anger? Am I in lust? Or am I in courageousness? And okay, where's it going to take me to get up on the chart? Right? Know where I am. That's what Lester said. See where you are and know where it is that you're going. So, it's more than just reciting a line on the 6 steps. That doesn't do it. Um, it's really understanding and integrating these things. So, going back to step 2, I decide to use the method and be imperturbable. Doesn't mean that automatically you're going to be imperturbable. Doesn't mean that you don't still have desires and feelings and you want the world more than you want freedom. And just saying that I want imperturbability more than I want approval, control, and safety. That doesn't mean that you really want it. You're just saying the words. And you can acknowledge, yeah, I want these things, but I know where I'm going. And step 2, like I said, it's very powerful when you look at it. Even though I'm still in my ego, I could still make a decision. I'm going to use the method. I'm going to get there. I'm going to make this a victory for freedom. And I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what I have to face. I'm doing it. And I'm just going to take it one step at a time. So, knowing and understanding now, like what we were just talking about taking all of your joy from within, doesn't mean that, okay, right now you just have to completely go abstinent, be a renunciate. No more chocolate cake, whatever. No more sex. But understanding, you know, I see where Lester's coming from. I see what the message is. And I see what's in the way for me. I got a lot of desire. I got a lot of disapproval. I'm hating those people. I got conflicts and all that stuff. But you know what? I'm going to face that stuff. I'm going to use that stuff for releasing. And I'm going to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? step by step. So what I'm really getting at is, even though you might not be perfect in it, it's still always a decision right now. I decide I'm going to get to a place where I take all my joy from within. And I'm going to use my desires, right? So the next time I have that desire for something, I'm going to look at it. And maybe, I go ahead and indulge in that desire, but you know what? I made a decision I'm going to go for freedom. And so even if I do indulge in it, I'll go ahead and release on it first. I'm going to let go of some of that desire, get a little bit freer. Let go of some of that wanting. And then if I decide to indulge it, I'm going to give myself permission to indulge it. Or if not, I'll set it aside. And as I keep doing that, I find that it's easier to just go, oh, yeah, I don't need that. That does not make me happy. And I could just walk by it and it has no pull on me whatsoever. And I can measure myself. Like Lester said, hey, I'm not in lust anymore. I'm much more up in peace. That thing cannot give me anything, cannot pull on me. I'm more imperturbable. Right? And you see, you've made a lot of movement in that direction, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so there you go. So just keep at it. And
Great.
keep
Thank you, Kris.
keep that decision. I'm going free
Yeah, that
this
is
lifetime.
very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so at the beginning of this session, we were talking about taking all of your joy from within and not taking any pleasure from the world, which to a lot of us seems like a pretty far stretch because there's so much stuff that we're addicted to in this world, and it might not even seem realistic to let that go. But just consider that one of the main aspects that Lester put forward about what does it mean to be free? What does it mean to be imperturbable? And in what way is that actionable? And there's one particular word that brings that into focus, and that is desirelessness. And the 6 steps is all about being desireless. And imperturbability is all about being desireless. So if you're really interested in freedom, you got to get to the place where you're desireless. Now, if you look at from your ego's perspective, being desireless, that doesn't sound so great. At best, that sounds maybe boring. At worst, it sounds painful. And even to the degree that, why would I even want to be here? I'd rather be dead than be desireless. It's like a fate worse than death. Seems horrible. But like I pointed out, and like we all have experienced, when we get nice and quiet, especially when we do those deep, deep cleanups that we do, you get really, really high, you're in a desireless place. You're in a place of beingness. And that's not boring and it's not dreadful. In fact, it's the opposite. And nothing is better than that state. And you know it when you're there. Now, when you get back into your ego, it's easy to forget that. And maybe you even dismiss it. Oh, maybe it's just a fantasy. And maybe it's unrealistic or impractical to be there all the time. Maybe it wasn't even real, that delectable state that I felt, that I knew. And then your ego's convincing you to forget the whole thing. But that's why it takes a commitment and a strong decision. I know where I'm going. Now I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. So just take a look at that word desireless. See what that brings up. See if it brings up a contraction in you. Like, ugh. Either I don't want that or I can't do that. That's impossible. I got too much invested in the world. I've got too many things hooking me into it. And I'll never be free of that. I'm not that strong. I'm no Lester. So just feel if you have a contraction in your stomach or chest. Open up. And just let that energy go. And let that go a little bit more. And some more. And even more. And some more. And even more. And see if you're trying to figure out what it means to be desireless, what that's going to be like. Does that mean you're going to be like a monk living in a cave, no possessions, no sex, no pleasure? And see, that's you asking your mind. And it's feeding you a bunch of negativity. Well, maybe it doesn't want you to be desireless. Because that mind is all about desire and wants you to keep listening to that desire. So you're dependent upon that mind. And you keep allowing it to boss you around. Right? So your mind doesn't know. So let go of looking in that empty cabinet for an answer that's never there. And see if you've been resisting the idea of being desireless. So on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the most resistant and 0 being the least resistant, see where you're at. And that resistance might show up as, yeah, I hear what you say, Lester, but F you, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to agree that freedom is a good thing, but I'm going to just turn around and be in desire. F you. That's what a lot of us do. We say we want freedom, but we turn around the next moment and do the exact opposite. And it's our resistance. So on a scale of 0 to 10, see where you're at. And could you just say yes to that resistance? Right? If you fight with it, if you try to push on it, it's just going to get stronger. If you say no to it, it just gets stronger. So instead, just say yes to it. And say yes to that resistance a little bit more. And say yes to it a little bit more. And some more. And say yes to it even more. And some more. And even more. And say yes to it even more. And more. And even more. And say yes to that resistance even more. And even more. And even more. And say yes to it even more. And more. And even more. And say yes to it even more. All right, now measure yourself again. On a scale of 0 to 10, see where you are now. Now, if there's any resistance left, let go of pushing down on it. Just let the rest of it come up now. And get out of the way. And let it leave. It wants to leave. So just let it leave. Let it evaporate and dissolve. It doesn't belong there. It doesn't help. So just let it go. And how could you say yes to freedom? And freedom is when you're not being pulled by anything. You're free. Free from any desire. Free from any wants, any urges, any needs. That's freedom. It doesn't mean that you stop doing anything. When you're free, you can go left, you can go right. You could have, you could not have, doesn't matter. But desire is not needed, and desire is not free. So just say yes to freedom. Say yes to quiet. Say yes to peace. And more. And even more. And could you surrender to peace? Could you surrender to beingness? Just say to yourself right now, I, 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 I am, I am, I am. And there's nothing better than that. I, with nothing added and nothing needed. All right? When you're ready, you allow your eyes to open. All right, so again, if you have any questions or you want to share any of your experiences or insights, please drop those in the comments below. I'll be happy to jump in and follow up with you. And one thing that I always stress is that releasing is a skill. It takes practice. And also, it's a skill that the more you practice it, it has a cumulative effect. Every time you release, whatever it is that you release is gone permanently. So the more you release, the clearer you get and the more skillful you get. And that ultimately is what makes you a successful releaser. And there's no better way to build up your skill than showing up for a live course. And this January, we have a new 6-week course about conscious creation. It's about attaining goals, spotting and letting go of your resistance, to really showing up and living in the world and being courageous and letting that resistance go. Because just imagine what you could accomplish in this world if you had no resistance. So letting that go in combination with getting really good at identifying and achieving goals is what this course is all about. So I'll put a link to that in the description below, and keep an eye out for that. It's going to start in late January, and keep up releasing. Make it constant and see it all the way through.